So yesterday we talked about weather and climate. What's the difference between weather and climate? Okay, so weather happens day to day. So if we were to look at the news and we see what the weather is like, that helps us to know what to wear tomorrow and the next day, right? And climate happens over time, it happens over years. So climate is more like if we are vacationing somewhere or if we are moving somewhere to know what kind of clothes to have for the region or location that we're in, right? So obviously, if we live here, we know that in the summer, we dress out. What do you wear in the summertime? Shorts and a t-shirt or a tank top, right? Okay, and in the winter, what do we wear? Coats and jackets, okay? But is it always super cold here? No, sometimes we might get away with long sleeves and a sweater. Sometimes we do have to wear hats, scarves, gloves. But if you were to travel to where I'm from in Pennsylvania, same time of the year, November, December, you're definitely wearing hats, scarves, and gloves, right? Because it's a little bit different there. The same would be if you're traveling to Hawaii, right? We know how to dress if we were going to Hawaii. Or if we were going to Washington State, okay? Things are different. So weather every day, day to day, climate happens over time. Then we talked about some factors that affect it. What are some factors that affect climate? What are some factors we talked about yesterday? The factors that affect climate. There you go. Say that a little bit louder. Latitude. Elevation. Topography. Water bodies. Global winds. And vegetation. Thank you. Okay? So those are some factors that affect them, and we talked about them each specifically yesterday. Okay, today we're going to talk about the Koppen system. And we are going to be able to describe how climates are classified using that specific system. Okay, so the Koppen climate classification system is the most commonly used system. Its uses mean monthly and annual values of temperature and precipitation. Okay, there are 5 principal groups: humid tropical, humid mid-latitude, dry, highland, and polar. And now yesterday, we saw some of these words because we talked about tropical, we talked about temperate, right? And we talked about polar. So tropical is near the what? Near the equator, so it's usually hot, warm, okay? Then we have temperate that shifted temperate. It went towards that direction, but it was above and below the what? Above and below the equator, okay? And then we went to polar, which went which directions? That's to the poles, okay? So a humid tropical climate, there are no winters. The monthly average temperature is above 18 degrees Celsius. So that would convert to 64.4 degrees Fahrenheit, what we're used to seeing. Precipitation can exceed 200 centimeters, and there are two types, wet tropical and tropical wet and dry. Okay, so obviously when we see tropical, we think hot, warm, and then when we see wet, we think water, and when we see dry, we think, what did we relate dry to over what? Over land. There you go. So wet tropical, high temperatures and high annual precipitation. Okay, tropical wet and dry, we've got high temperatures, high annual precipitation, and these experience distinct periods of low precipitation. Okay, so you've got high precipitation, low precipitation, periods of low precipitation. Next, next we have humid mid-latitude climate with mild winters and an average temperature in the coldest month that is below 18 degrees Celsius but above -3 degrees Celsius. There are three types here: humid subtropical, marine west coast, and dry summer subtropical. So humid subtropical is between 25 and 40 degrees latitude on the eastern side of the continent. Okay, so east this way. Summers are hot and sultry. Winters are wild. Pretty sure that's supposed to say mild. Okay, and this would be the North Carolina climate, so where we live. Dry summer subtropical is between 30 and 45 degrees latitude. So strong winter rainfall, and this is only found in California. So that's on the what coast? The West Coast. And the West Coast is not the best coast. Nobody ever heard that? All right. Next is marine West Coast. So this is between 40 and 65 degrees north and south. So when we're talking north and south, that takes us back to when we did temperate. So that's above, below, okay? This summers are cool. The winters are mild. This is Northern California to Southern Alaska. Okay, so does everybody see the difference there? So humid subtropical, think North Carolina. Dry summer subtropical, California. And then when we're getting into the marine West Coast, we're talking about the West Coast, so we're talking California to Southern Alaska. Okay? Next is the humid mid-latitude with severe winters. Okay, so severe winters have an average temperature in the coldest month that is below -3 degrees Celsius. So that's about 26.6 degrees Fahrenheit. There are two types of these. Humid continental, and we talked about continental. Continental's where? Over what? Over land, thank you, okay? And then we have subarctic. Arctic is what? Cold, really cold, okay? So in the humid continental, okay, this is not in the southern hemisphere. So this is between 40 and 50 degrees north latitude. The winters are very severe. The summers are warm and have great precipitation. Okay, so everybody following here. Next is the subarctic. Okay, winters are long and they are bitterly cold. Because when we think Arctic, you got to think really cold. The summers are warm, but they're very short. And the highest annual temperature range on Earth is found here. Why do you think that might be? Why do you think that would have the highest range? Where are we talking about? Subarctic. Arctic is what? Come on, y'all. I know you know this. It's super cold, right? So polar is cold, but Arctic is extremely cold. So if we're talking subarctic, think if you hear the word sub-zero, okay? So Arctic, extremely cold. But then it tells us that the summers are warm, even though they're short. So there's a big range in temperature there, okay? Next is the dry climate. Yearly precipitation is not as great as the potential loss of water by evaporation. What's evaporation? Huh? Okay, so the water is taken back up into the atmosphere. So there are two types of these, arid or desert, okay, and semi-arid or the steppe, okay? So transition zone that surrounds this bottom one here, the desert, and separates it from its humid climates. So it's what surrounds the desert. So you've got your actual desert, and then the area around it would be your semi-arid. Okay, so the highland climate is cooler and wetter than nearby areas at lower elevations. We talked about elevation yesterday. So as elevation goes up, what happens to the temperature? Huh? It decreases, right? It gets what? Colder. Remember we talked about being here, and then we talked about being on the west side of North Carolina. What's on the west side of North Carolina? The mountains. And it's what there? It's cooler, it's colder there than it is here, okay? Next is the polar climate. So the average temperature of the warmest month is below 10 degrees Celsius. There's little precipitation that falls here. The winters are extremely cold, okay? We're in polar, Arctic cold. The summers are cool, and there are two types of these, the tundra and the ice caps. You hear me saying desert, you hear me saying tundra. Does anybody know what those are? Types of what? Begins with a B. A biome. Anybody ever heard of a biome? No? Okay. So these are types of biomes that I'm getting into here, okay? So the tundra is treeless regions found in almost exclusively in the northern hemisphere. The plant life is mosses, shrubs, and flowering herbs. Moss, shrubs. Where do you find those? Like low to the ground, right? They're not like big pine trees or things that we might see in a neighborhood or at a park, okay? They're all things that are low to the ground. The ice caps, the monthly average temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius, and these are covered with permanent ice and snow, okay? So the ice caps, permanent ice and snow. Tundra, okay, you still might think kind of cold, but there's still life here, but it's everything that's low to the ground, okay? Does anybody have questions?